Alrighty, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the A to Z Poll Podcast. My name is Zachary Siegel, and I'll be your host for today. If you like this kind of content, if you like college football, if you like being informed, come join us. You can find us on Twitter, on YouTube, on TikTok, just about everywhere you want. We do college football content every week, and without further ado, let's get into another crazy week of college football. All right, going into this week. Oregon remains our top team. They took down Michigan 38 to 17. My biggest takeaway from this game is Dylan Gabriel looks phenomenal. If it wasn't for this specific class, if it wasn't for this year having an outrageously talented Heisman contenders, this would be he would be able to win it. I mean, he would have won it, in my opinion, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and those are the two off the top of my head. But he would have probably beaten out Bryce Young for it, and he probably would have beaten out Devonta Smith for it, in my opinion. There are probably a few other years that I'm just not remembering where he would have won it. Um, that being said, Ashton Genty, Travis Hunter, and Cam Ward are all three pretty high on that list. But Oregon is finally looking at that team that, you know, we expected them to be. There's a very open seat at the proverbial college football dinner table that has just been left empty right now for what an elite team is. And somebody's got to fill it. Right now, Oregon's probably residing in it, but they're just gonna have to keep playing how they're playing in order to keep that up. Number two, Georgia. They beat Florida 34-20. But honestly, if I think that if I think that if DJ Lagway never goes down, I don't know if Georgia wins this game. I mean, they won by two scores, but it really felt like they pulled it off. And Georgia just does not feel championship ready right now. What I was saying a minute ago, how there seems to be an open seat at the elite table. I mean, it's fun. It's fun that college football does not have an elite team right now. I really do like that. But what I don't like is just, seeing a team like Georgia struggling so much. I think that, like I said, they're going to find ways to win games, and I still think they're definitely capable of winning the SEC, if not winning the national championship. But they're going to have to do some stuff, and Kirby Smart is going to have to get his team ready to go if he's going to, actually make a real run for this. Number 13, the Miami Hurricanes. They put a whooping on Duke, 53 to 31. Now the game started a little too close for comfort. It started pretty slow, but eventually Miami just shut the door, right? They were losing by 3 at halftime and then outscored them 36 to 10 in the second half. Diabolical ending to this game. What Miami is going to have to learn how to play in all four quarters if they're going to win in the playoffs, but as of now, at least in ACC play, this is a more than fine way to win, especially if you're going to be able to put up 53 points a game. As of last week, Miami was the leading team in yards, points, yards attempted, all that basically, in the FBS level. So and I can't imagine they lost that this week with a 53-point performance. Number four, Ohio State taking down Penn State in Happy Valley 20 to 13. I mean, like, this is a big win for Ryan Day, but it might have been a bigger loss for James Franklin. Ohio State, they were all teed up and ready to be driven into the fairway of losses, but I mean, they made it past kind of this challenge. And like I said last week, I said, look, there's two real truths to Ohio State. One, they don't lose to Penn State, but also they don't beat top five teams. And they've beaten top five teams more times than they've lost to Penn State. I think at this point it's just a James Franklin problem, as far as Penn State goes. Speaking of James Franklin, Penn State's number five. They lost 13 to 20 to Ohio State. Is this it for him? Like, if I'm a Penn State faithful, I don't know how much more of this I can handle. I mean, look, he's beating bad teams, and he's been beating bad teams for a really long time. He's beating good teams. He's been beating good teams for a very long time. He's losing to really good teams. right? He's losing to those really good teams. He's losing to these elite teams. We talk all the time about how you're like, oh, if you had a 12 team system for all of James Franklin's tenure, he would have been, much better. But we didn't. We had that thing. And this year, he has the opportunity. This is their first loss of the season. He still can very much, win the Big Ten and even without winning the Big Ten, still make the college football playoff. But it's really feeling like, Penn State fans got to be at just about the end of their rope with this. Number six, Texas. They did not have a game this week, but they probably needed a bye week after a really close one to Vanderbilt. Um, Look, Sark needs to show what this program is made of and why they are, renowned as an elite program. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a pretty vacant seat for elite teams at the proverbial college football dinner table. Someone's got to fill it. I mean, Texas is among the most talented teams. I think Texas and Ohio State are probably the two most actually talented teams in college football right now. They just need to be able to put it all together and stop making those silly mistakes. If I was Coach Sark, I would have spent a lot more time on this bye week, spending it like going over the like basic schematics, running your routes correctly, making your correct reads and blocks, than I would have coming in with a creative, crazy, weird uh, game plan to try to beat the next opponent. Speaking of executing on a play-to-play basis, Indiana, number 7, 47-10 win over Michigan State. I just get more impressed each week with them. And of course, Cade Rourke ended up throwing for 4 touchdowns and a 350, right? They have the same kind of they like Kurt Cignetti is never satisfied, right? And it kind of gives me the same vibe as like Saban at Alabama, right? Now, obviously, Indiana's got to do a lot before they be considered, an Alabama-esque program. But the way that Kurt Cignetti conducts himself and conducts his team, it reminds me of those times when like you have Alabama winning with minutes or seconds left and making a mistake, and Coach Saban losing his mind on the sideline. That's the kind of dedication and perfectionism that I really feel like I see out of this Indiana team. Um, this is a team that I could absolutely see at this point, making a real run and definitely making a playoff spot. Um, Number 8, Tennessee. Rivalry week, man. 28-18 win over Kentucky. Um, Look, they handle business. Kentucky, they're only 3-6, but they have proven that they can beat elite talent. I mean, they almost beat Georgia and they beat Ole Miss. Tennessee, in my opinion, had to stumble and fall a little bit in order to reach their full potential, in order to figure out their mistakes and be able to fix them throughout, their time in this season. I think, Nico Iamaleava is going to get better. I think that they're going to continue to grow as a program. And I mean, honestly, still a dark horse to win the SEC that seems surprisingly wide open this year. Um, and I think something that really separates Tennessee is that they do have the best defense in college football. I think, and it's kind of crazy because like James Pierce isn't even been like the sole driving factor of it. They have had, contributors all over the field and have allowed, generally less than 30 to 20 points a game. They're definitely leading the SEC in less points given up per game. And if their offense, if Nico can be a net positive and not a net negative, they're going to win a lot of games. Um, Again, we're still in the top 10, so winning a lot of games. BYU, they're 8-0 right now, and they did not have a game this year. But here we go. The stage is set for the Holy War. In the blue corner, BYU coming out of nowhere, undefeated 10 weeks into the season and leading the Big 12. And in the red corner, preseason favorite to win the conference, but an injury-riddled Utah Utes. This may have been a game built on faith, but there is no God present here. These teams are out for blood. This is a game that is absolutely circled on my calendar. I'm so excited to watch it. Number 10, Notre Dame. They also did not have a game. But honestly, I was not really taking into consideration earlier in the season that, after the Fighting Irish lost to the Fighting Huskies, that, they would be able to compete for a spot kind of because of utter chaos. I think I mentioned, after they lost that game, I was like, it's kind of out of their hands now. They need a lot to go right. I was kind of referring to some of their teams on their schedule being good and then getting beat by them. They've just had a complete and astronomical breakdown of every team essentially, except for pretty much Indiana, BYU, and Oregon and Army. Um, Complete and utter breakdowns all around them. And I guess Boise State. That has allowed them to crawl their way back into the top 10 and back into real playoff contention. Speaking of Boise State, though, they took a massive win against San Diego State, 56 to 100 to 24, 100, 56 to 24, 124, closer to what Ashton Genty did this weekend. Look, Halloween may be over. Michael Myers is not going anywhere. He's the boogeyman. He's the thing chasing you in your nightmares. He's the Heisman frontrunner, in my opinion. Even with a relative down week a couple weeks ago, he's still playing at an elite level. And Barry Sanders' record is absolutely within reach for him. When he's on, he's the driving force behind one of the best group of five teams and one of the best, honestly, just teams in college football right now. Number 12, Alabama. Honestly, it feels like they got back to 12 a little out of their own fruition. Did not have a game this week, but they have a pretty big one this next week. The 6-2 Alabama Crimson Tide travel to Death Valley to play the 6-2 LSU Tigers. This is gonna. I mean, they're both teams are playing for their lives right now, right? Alabama will probably have the namesake benefit of a college football playoff committee, but I mean, I don't see how you can let a three-loss Alabama team over a one-loss Notre Dame team or a zero-loss BYU team or really any of these guys in the top spots right here. They would be barely creeping in at the moment. But I don't know like how I feel about their chances if they lose this game. If they win this game, it's a lot better. If they lose this game, season could be effectively over at this point. Um, but a team though that kind of just renewed their season, if you could call it renewing, they really lost it that much. Just a bad week one loss. That's going to be Southern Methodist University. It's like a 48 to 25 victory over formerly undefeated Pitt. No team's been able to do it so far, but I mean, since putting Kevin Jennings in, he's really been the answer for all the problems this team has had. They are such a different team than who they were when they played Nevada a few months ago. This team's defense has stepped up astronomically. The Besides Kevin Jennings, they've just had playmakers all over the field. SMU feels like a completely different team and a team that right now is technically ranked number two in the ACC and should, you know, I wouldn't look at them take them lightly at all. Uh, Number 14, now number two in the Big 12, that's going to be Iowa State. They finally took a 22 to 23 loss against Texas Tech. A victim finally slipped out of the grasps of the boa constrictor that is their team. Iowa State was just not able to capitalize on the opportunities they had. They tied the turnover battle, won the penalty battle, won the time of possession battle, won pretty much every yardage stat. They just could not find their way into the end zone or find their way to get points enough. And even though they won the penalty battle, they had 8 penalties for 59 yards. That's one of the worst penalty marks that I think I've seen them have all year. They were leading FBS in least amount of penalties, and I'm not sure that they do anymore. I think, Matt Campbell will get these guys right. I hope they don't have like a Navy effect where, Navy lost one week and then got beat by Rice last week pretty bad. I think Iowa State will probably end up bouncing back pretty big, and they right now are probably still very much in contention to play in the Big 12 championship. Number 15, a team that kind of had it made, kind of had a clear path to, really to the SEC championship, but that was Texas A&M. They lost 20 to 44 to South Carolina last week. They spent one week as a top 10 team, and then just it all broke down. Look, credit to South Carolina. They came up with a great game plan. They shut down Texas A&M's young quarterback, and look, the Aggies are not out of it. I mean, they're a 7-2 team. They're a two-loss team. We have a lot of those. But they're still in the car, but they are just no longer in the driver's seat right now. Um, I do think with one SEC loss, like I said, they are still more than capable of making their way there. And South Carolina has shown really good flashes this year. This could have been a worse loss. They could have lost to Vanderbilt while being the number one team in the country, Alabama. But this definitely hurts a lot. They're definitely now on the outside looking in. And like I said, they're still in the car, but they do not possess the keys. Number 16, the Army Black Knights. They had a 20-3 win against the Air Force Academy. And unlike Navy, who has seemed to stumble and then fall, Army is really prevailing as one of the best academies, if actually the best academy, um, among the three. They're still an undefeated dark horse for the college football playoff, and I think there's a real shot that if you know Boise State ends up winning a bunch, they could potentially get an at-large bid, which would allow Army to potentially get that 12th seed or that last bid, which would be, I think, I mean, a good way of just having, some parity in the sport and really putting the best 12 teams out there. Do I think Army is beating Texas? No, I don't. But I do think that they've beaten the teams in front of them and they've beaten them pretty well. And I think that this is a very, very good Army team, a very well coached Army team, if anything, too. And I think that they are definitely my front runners for the ACC, the AAC right now. Number 17, another team that really stumbled last week that I was really high on until I wasn't, but that's Clemson. They lost 21-33 against Louisville. I think they somehow got a little too comfortable. I think in the beginning of the year I said, not the beginning of the year, probably about 4 weeks ago, I said that Dabo probably is fine with them not being in the national spotlight at the moment because that lets them work in the shadows and get underestimated and not teams don't take him seriously. Well, that did not happen in Louisville. They finally got back in the top 10. They got in the national spotlight, and Louisville took them right out of it. Um, Now, if the season were to end today, Clemson would not be in the ACC championship. They have two losses, one conference loss, so they would be behind SMU and Miami right now. It's very possible that they could still make it. Both Miami and SMU have come very close to losses, but I think that Clemson has just dug themselves a much bigger hole. LSU at 18. This was a nice reflection week for them, especially with Alabama and Nick Saban coming in. Not wow, Alabama and Kalen DeBoer coming into town. They they definitely needed this kind of a time to figure themselves out. And look, Brian Kelly, as good of a head coach as he's been in his tenure, he's clearly had some lapses here. And I'm not even going to count the week one against USC. That was a neutral site, closer to USC, and just a really tough game on the road. Uh, last game they played against Texas A&M, that was pretty bad. But they also had a really good win against Ole Miss. The thing is, though, that Alabama is also playing for their playoff spots, right? They want this bad. Kalen DeBoer it kept a lot of these guys here based off saying that, like, look, you guys stay here. We're still Alabama and we're still going to make the playoff. You know this. Now they're sitting with two losses. Now they're sitting with two division losses. And they have to sit here and say, okay, well, if we lose any more games, that's just it. That's our season. We might lose a lot of recruiting power too, right? That's a huge problem for this program. You're bringing a cornered animal, right, and putting them in the same cage as you, and you now have to tame that animal. I think LSU is absolutely has the capabilities of winning this game. It's just will they be able to take advantage of some of the major problems that Alabama has shown throughout this year? And I think a lot of that's going to come from the veteran presence of this LSU team. Number 19, Ole Miss. They took a 63-31 win against Arkansas. And holy cow, Jackson Dart threw for 515 yards and six total touchdowns off of just 31 attempts. That is absolutely unbelievable. Like that is a game that could propel you to the top to a late season Heisman push. That's not even mentioning the fact that Jackson Dart, among all that, led his team in rushing yards as well. He is what played exactly how I think teams expected him to play against, LSU and some of these other teams that they lost to. it just happened a little later in the season. Ole Miss again, not out of it. They lost to Kentucky and LSU. So not, I mean, Kentucky's a bad loss, but there are teams with two losses. They can absolutely find themselves back in, and we'll see how the college football playoff committee values them. But I mean, right now, this is the kind of performance that gets you a little more recognition come committee time. Number 20, a team that's not getting any recognition. That's gonna be Washington State. They did not have a game this week. But I mean, look, they're kind of playing for their future right now. They're technically not a Power Five school anymore, and the Pac-12 is looking brand new, and it's all different. And so they're looking to run this new iteration of the Pac-12. And with a quarterback like John Mateer, as long as he doesn't get any, somebody doesn't throw millions in NIL at him and get him to transfer to the SEC or something like that. He's only a sophomore, so he could be there a couple more years and still do a lot for this program. Number 21, uh, Pitt. They lost 25-48 to Southern Methodist. They dropped to fourth in the ACC. It's still up for grabs. Pitt could still do it, but they really have struggled on offense in the last couple of weeks. It kind of got overshadowed by that dominant performance against Syracuse because of how great the defense played. The offense didn't really have to play, but in the past 3 or 4 weeks now, they have not had the offensive production that I think they kind of were riding the coattails of coming into these last few games. It was only a matter of time. They'd had a couple really bad or really close games, like a 17-15 win over Cal, and like I said, that Syracuse win where Eli Holstein even went out a little injured, and um, they still ended up not having to play much offense. But like I said, wide open division. We'll see what happens. Number 22, Colorado. They've quietly stuck their way back up into the conversation as well because they're really good at keeping good things going, right? Not to take anything away from what they're doing, but look, they're third in the Big 12. They are just rolling and rolling and rolling. They beat Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. And look, if they keep just winning and keep it rolling, like they have a very win-outable schedule. I know Texas Tech just beat an undefeated Iowa State team. And no game is easy, but Buffalo absolutely has the capabilities and again, two of the most talented players in college football are on this team. It makes sense that they would be pretty good. So if they can figure it out in some other places, that might be a good thing. I finally threw Vandy on this list. Diego Pavia has been a man possessed, and they've been playing really solid football on both sides of the ball. This is kind of a team that, like, they got three losses, including one to Georgia State. They're not making, the SEC championship. They're not making the playoffs, but they are playing for a pretty solid, 2025 season and beyond, right? A big win versus programs like Alabama, keeping it close with Texas, taking it to the man, making a bowl game, finding yourself in the top 25. These are all things get that look attractive to commits, um, to recruits and get commitments. And being in the SEC, you already have that kind of divisional advantage. I think that if they can win a few more games, especially like a decent bowl game, they're looking for a nice couple year stretch. Number 24, a team that I think has been really overlooked this year, but that's going to be Western Kentucky. Um, the Hilltoppers are currently in the lead in Conference USA. They took down Kennesaw State, which is not a good team, but a team that took down Liberty, probably their biggest competition. With a couple losses from an Army or a Boise State, Western Kentucky can actually find themselves in this conversation for, you know, uh, for the 12 seed. And they don't seem like a team that I could see making a case to be like an at-large bid like Boise State. And honestly, Army doesn't really either at this point. But Western Kentucky could absolutely, with a little bit of luck, with the wave of a wand and three wishes from a genie, could probably sneak their way into the 12 seed. Finally, to round out this list, might have been a little low, but I'm okay with it. It's gonna be what Kansas State Wildcats. They had a 19-24 loss against Houston. This was the classic Avery Johnson experience. We saw the extreme highs and the extreme lows 30 game seconds apart. You know, K-State needs to be more consistent at quarterback if they're going to make a real run at the Big 12. Last time they won the Big 12, they had Will Howard, who we all know is Ohio State's quarterback right now. And he was a model of consistency that year, which ironically, he's not being that much of a model of consistency for Ohio State. But that season, he was, you know, very, very good. And, one of the reasons why he was one of the top ranked um, quarterbacks within the class, within the transfer class, and why Ohio State was so good with getting him. All right, my honorable mentions are Missouri, Louisville, Iowa, Texas Tech, Illinois, South Carolina, and Arizona State. My Heisman watch right now, I like doing this whole 10 list. I feel like my top four is pretty set. So 10 to 1. We'll do it this way, 10 to 1. Number 10, we got Kevin Jennings from Southern Methodist. While he doesn't have necessarily the counting stats that you would expect out of a Heisman winner right now, he didn't really start the season, but he has absolutely turned a team that, lost to not that great Nevada team in the beginning of the year, completely turn them around and have them in a position to compete for their conference, their first year in the conference with a team that I personally thought was going to be really terrible. Number 9, you got Jake Retzlaff from BYU, the BYU quarterback, just undefeated quarterback on an undefeated team. Number 8, Jalen Milroe. He's playing better and better since the Vandy loss, and he really hasn't played poorly this year. And we can't forget that Georgia game. He's still a very talented quarterback, and I think if he does end up finding his way in New York and winning it, it would be absolutely it would be acceptable for sure. And they're going to point back at his Heisman game, which would be the Georgia game. Number 7, Ohio State's Jeremiah Smith. I don't think we're going to see a true freshman wide receiver win it, especially not in a class as talented. But he's a generational talent at wide receiver so far, and he'll get 2 more years at the college level and 2 more chances to secure that trophy. Number 6, Le'Veon Moss from Texas A&M. He's been, in my opinion, the second best running back in football. Sick name for a player. I mean, you would think just with that name he should win the Heisman, but he has been, a model of consistency. He's been very good. Number 5, someone who hasn't actually been a model of consistency, but I mentioned earlier, Jackson, you don't throw for half 1,000 yards and 6 and half a dozen touchdowns and not get your name here somewhere. I think that was the best, maybe the best single game performance by a quarterback that we have seen all year, and I think that propels him to a top 5 Heisman odds spot. Just because after the top 4 it feels so wide open. Now the top 4 I haven't changed, so I think it's Dylan Gabriel at 4th. Cam Ward at 3rd, Travis Hunter at 2nd, and Ashton Jeanty at 1st. I think this is just the same reasoning as before for these orders. Dylan Gabriel been playing very well and could absolutely leapfrog some people, and I think just because he's the only one of these in a Big Ten or SEC uniform, that he'll probably find himself in New York. Number 3, Cam Ward, best quarterback I think in college football, and he's on an undefeated team, the last undefeated team of the top 5. And if they can win the ACC and all that stuff, I think he's going to be one of the main, if not the main contributor. Number 2, Travis Hunter. What do you got to say about that? I mean, he averages 100 and 200, 400 plays a game, and is still performing at an insane level. And number 1, to no one's surprise, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. I think it'd be a crime not to at least have him in New York. He's been, like I said, a model of consistency and is potentially going to break Barry Sanders' record. But yeah, he's been insane. My games of the week: Purdue versus Ohio State. Would love to see another giant killer from Purdue. Texas State at Louisiana Monroe. Kind of a weird one, but we got 2 solid quarterbacks. Jared McLeod and General Booty kind of facing it off on a Louisiana Monroe team that is not failed to cover this year, and a Texas State team that's kind of underperformed. A game that preseason I would have looked at and been like, oh, that's going to be a blowout by Texas State, which now could be a very, very good game. Georgia versus Ole Miss, a team in Georgia that's been really struggling. Carson Beck has kind of been terrible, and an Ole Miss team that since losing has their second game has kind of been killing it. Especially, like I said, with that Jackson Dart 500-yard and 6 touchdown performance. The next one, you got Michigan versus number 7 Indiana. This is just going to be another big test. Michigan is still a good team on paper. Then Indiana is a team that, this is going to be one of the bigger tests. Each game that you win is going to be a bigger test for Kurt Signetti. Uh, Colorado, number 22, Colorado at Texas Tech. Look, Colorado is number three in the Big 12. They're fighting for their lives, and Texas Tech just took down, undefeated or formerly undefeated Iowa State. I think this is absolutely a game that Colorado should be very, it's not a trap game. It's just a hard game. Uh, Next, number 12, Bama versus number 18, LSU. How do you not like a classic Bama versus LSU rivalry? And finally, the Holy War, number 9, BYU and unranked Utah. I mean, I did the whole in this quarter and that corner thing, but I am very excited for this game, and I think that is going to be a crazy game. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Leave comments what you think about it. I'll be in Cincinnati this week at the West Virginia Cincinnati game. So if anybody's there, let me know, and we'll do some. But thanks for watching. Go watch some football, and I hope your team wins.